Jehovah's worshippers have long praised him with song. But how did singing become a part of our modern-day worship? The story begins more than 150 years ago. The year is about 1869 in Allegheny, Pennsylvania, USA. Charles Taze Russell is a young man searching for scriptural truth. One evening, he's walking along and hears something, singing coming from a religious meeting being held in a basement. He goes in, and what he hears sparks a fire for Bible study like never before. Later, Russell and his associates make music's role in pure worship clear as they rediscover Bible truth. Charles Taze Russell may have come to appreciate the power of music to stir emotions from a music business his father owned for a period of time. He believed that the singing of the truth is a good way to get it into the heads and hearts of God's people.
We're watching the November 2021 JW Broadcasting episode, and there's a new segment series, Our History in Motion. Jehovah's Witnesses now have a new way in which they can be spoon-fed a whitewashed version of their history. I'm sorry, that's what we're getting. We're getting speculation, we're getting mundane elements of Jehovah's Witness history spun a certain way to make them out to be something that they're not. I'm sorry, Charles Taze Russell walking down the street and hearing singing, how on earth do you make that the origin story of Jehovah's Witnesses and singing? Yes, I guess it would have caught his attention to hear singing, but describing this event as sparking a fire for Bible history like never before.
He goes in, and what he hears sparks a fire for Bible study like never before.
It's a bit tenuous, isn't it? It's a bit of a stretch to point to this event, this seminal event in 1869, as the genesis of music and singing in the Jehovah's Witness religion. The singing just notified him that a meeting was taking place. If there had been lyrics in the song that particularly moved him, well, that would be one thing. He was literally just alerted to the fact that a meeting was taking place by the singing. So the fact that they've gone to the trouble of using those visuals, that artwork and the sound effects, and I don't know, they've gone to great lengths to make a point that isn't very forceful or is at best tenuous. And all of this to point to Charles Taze Russell as the one who kick-started using music in the organization. They suggest it may have been a music business his father owned that impressed upon him the power of music.
Charles Taze Russell may have come to appreciate the power of music to stir emotions from a music business his father owned for a period of time.
He may have come to appreciate? You insert the word may when you don't have a clue, when you're purely speculating. This series has only just started, and though there are many established facts that we can talk about when it comes to Charles Taze Russell and early Jehovah's Witness history, what they're starting with is total speculation. I'm sorry, you don't need your father to have owned a music business to grasp that music can move people emotionally. And isn't it interesting that they kind of acknowledge the potential for manipulation in music? If you can use music in a clever way, you can bypass logic and reason, can't you? You can go straight for the emotions. If you can engage people emotionally, you don't need to do as much legwork in terms of reasoning with them and proving things to them. So the organization here is basically admitting, as far as I can see, that yes, music is a fantastic way of hooking people in, whether the beliefs themselves make sense or not.
The first issue of Zion's Watchtower, published in July of 1879, announced a songbook, the first of many to come. It was called Songs of the Bride. It contained 144 hymns or religious songs of praise. The Bible students sang at their meetings and assemblies. What was it like to sing these songs back in the early 1900s? Imagine you're at one of Charles Taze Russell's lectures. As you walk in, you're handed a small sheet of paper. You look for a seat, but it's packed. As the crowd quiets down, they announce that the meeting will start with a song and prayer. In a church, you expect to find a hymn book in your pew, but this is a rented hall. Then you realize that the paper you were handed has the song lyrics, and it also has a place to leave your name and address if you'd like a Bible study. So when the audience starts to sing, you join in. What did songs sound like back then? Let's listen to a song we sang for over 8 decades. Here's a recording from 1916. That's a little different than how our songs sound today. Compare different versions of this song, and you'll notice the lyrics and theme changed over the years. Why all the changes? Because our songs reflect our current understanding of scriptural truth. As the light gets brighter, we understand the truth more clearly, so the songs change. Our first songbook explained the goal to publish songs free from objectionable theology, and it's been the case ever since. We don't hold on to songs for tradition or nostalgia. We sing it because it's the truth.
I am flabbergasted by the irony here. We've just heard William Malenfant. This is William Malenfant narrating. We've just heard him say, we don't hold on to songs for tradition or nostalgia. We sing them because it's the truth. I'm sorry, what is this whole series about? Isn't this whole series appealing to tradition and nostalgia? We've just had the viewer asked to imagine attending a Charles Taze Russell lecture. So if you could go back in time, if you could go in a time machine, Jehovah's Witnesses are asked to imagine that this is something that they might do, as though the teachings haven't changed since then, even though in the same breath, William Malenfant is acknowledging that the teachings change so much and so frequently that they need to publish new songs to keep up with the new understandings of Scripture.
Why all the changes? Because our songs reflect our current understanding of scriptural truth. As the light gets brighter, we understand the truth more clearly, so the songs change.
Well, if that's truly the case, why would a Jehovah's Witness of 2021 wish to attend a Charles Taze Russell lecture? Because Charles Taze Russell, in his lecture, would be saying a lot of things that Jehovah's Witnesses today don't believe. His lecture would be effectively an apostate talk. And to underscore this, you don't have to go back in time 130, 140 years to attend a Charles Taze Russell lecture. You can just join the Bible students. And this is interestingly what someone from my class did, my MTS class. I moved to Croatia because I met my wife, Diana, who is Croatian. The reason we met is because someone from her congregation, a Croatian Jehovah's Witness, attended my MTS. That guy is now a Bible student. He's no longer a Jehovah's Witness. He's been disfellowshipped or disassociated for apostasy. But we're not in contact. We're not buds or friends. He's literally exchanged one cult for another. He is a Russellite. He follows the teachings of Charles Taze Russell. And by the way, if you want to know why I think the Bible student movement is a cult, please check out my interview with my good friend Peter Yike, who is a former Bible student, a former Russellite. You'll be amazed at how the Bible student movement came to embrace many of the same cult attributes that the Jehovah's Witnesses have, even long after the two groups had splintered. This is a negative organization that is every bit as controlling and insular. So is that what William Malenfant really wants Jehovah's Witnesses to do? To care about what Charles Taze Russell was teaching? If you're going to ask them to imagine attending a sermon and at the same time demonize them as apostates, if they actually end up becoming followers of Russell, then what you have is a massive contradiction.
From the 1928 songbook onward, there was a big shift. Many songs were written by our brothers and sisters. They put more emphasis on Jehovah's name, attributes, and kingdom. You can even tell by the title, Songs of Praise to Jehovah. Some of the songs might even sound familiar, like this one. Are your parents in the truth? Your grandparents? Even your great-grandparents? If so, they sang the same song as you at their meetings and assemblies. That's a real legacy. Let's fast forward to the 1940s. Some of our brothers were imprisoned for their faith. The world was at war and needed good news. So we intensified our preaching and teaching work. This is when the Watchtower Bible School of Gilead and Theocratic Ministry Schools started. And it's also when singing was reintroduced at our meetings. Wait a minute. Reintroduced? That means we stopped singing at meetings. When? Find out in the next episode of our History in Motion.
Well, that's a cliffhanger. Would you like to know why we stopped singing for a time? You'll want to watch the second part of this video. It will be posted soon on jw.org, and look for future episodes of our History in Motion.
Oh, I have done, Leon Weaver. Don't worry about that. Thanks to the passage of time since this JW Broadcasting episode was released, there has been part 2, and I've watched it, which I will come to. This is actually something I commented on as far back as 2017 while visiting the Jehovah's Witness World Headquarters in Warwick. Incredibly, for a short period in the early 1940s, even singing of hymns was verboten for witnesses. Not that you would know this from reading the Warwick wall displays. Peter, this is interesting. Those of you who have my book will know that I write a little bit about Rutherford not liking music.
Yes.
And there's a paragraph here, music, singing praises to Jehovah has always been important in true worship and to the Bible students. And it's interesting because Rutherford actually banned singing at the meetings for the final few years of his life, and only after he died did they bring it back.
Yes.
Amazing. As you will have seen there, Jehovah's Witnesses touring the exhibit at Warwick, dealing with Jehovah's Witness history, at least as of 2017, which is roughly when it opened, were given no clue about this aspect of their history, a period of 6 years between 1938 and 1944 when they stopped singing. And remember, in this episode, we started off with David Splain talking about organizational progress, advancement, about the verse in Isaiah where God brings in silver and gold in place of copper. Well, how do you explain that in the context of flip-flops? We had a flip-flop with the elders. We start off with elders, we ditch the elders, and then we go back to having elders. Same thing happened with music, with singing at congregation meetings. In 1938, Joseph Franklin Rutherford decided, for whatever reason, that he didn't like it, and therefore all Jehovah's Witnesses needed to stop singing. In fact, we can show you a 1938 watchtower, or a quote from it. A few words like the above pronounced at the beginning of the study would be far more beneficial than to occupy the same time in singing songs which often express much that is out of harmony with the truth of and concerning God's kingdom. So this was the, I think, May 1st, 1938 watchtower. The faithful slave, Joseph Franklin Rutherford, and his associates decide that the songs that Jehovah's Witnesses are singing often include things that are out of harmony with the truth, and so they scrap the whole thing. Guess what changed? Guess what changed so that singing was brought back in 1944? Well, the only thing I can think of is that Joseph Franklin Rutherford died. He died in 1942, and 2 years after his death, the new administration, Nathan Knorr and Fred Franz pretty much, brought singing back. That, for me, can surely be the only reason why this happened. And when you refer to the Divine Purpose book, this is the forerunner to the Proclaimer's history book from the 1990s. This was published in 1959, and it very briefly alludes to singing being discarded or abandoned and then brought back. On page 215, it says, the United Announcers Theocratic Assembly, August 9 to 13th, 1944, was held in Buffalo, New York, and provisions were made to tie in 16 other cities in the United States, as well as 2 in Canada, the first there since the ban. In addition to the stirring and instructive talks, several new publications were released, outstanding among them being the Watchtower edition of the American Standard Version Bible. Other releases included the book The Kingdom is at Hand, and a question booklet to accompany it, and a new songbook called Kingdom Service Songbook. This red-covered songbook was received with genuine enthusiasm by the brothers, especially when it was announced that the book would be used at the weekly service meetings, because for some time prior to this, congregational singing had been dispensed with. Now the brothers were happy to be able to sing again. No explanation is given in the material as to why singing was dispensed with, or what the decision-making process was for bringing it back, but they do at least mention it. They do at least mention this aspect of the history. Again, it was absent from my recollection in the exhibit when I was walking around Warwick. You won't really find much mention of it in some of the more recent rewritings of Watchtower history. But it seems the organization has now realized, we can't cover over everything. We can't keep everything secret. it's better if we at least allude to certain embarrassing episodes in our history, even if we won't dignify our audience by explaining why these things happened. So you saw Leon Weaver referring to the cliffhanger at the end of part 1 of this new video series. Here is the relevant part of part 2.
For the most part, we stopped singing at congregation meetings in the late 30s. For how long? Publications in the archive reveal that it was from 1938 to 1944. And though brothers and sisters did sing at conventions, they really missed singing together at congregation meetings. When did we start again? Welcome to 1944. You're at the United Announcers Theocratic Assembly in Buffalo, New York, USA. The clock above the arena floor reads 4:30 in the afternoon. Brother F.W. Franz steps up to give a talk called Song of Kingdom Service. He says, "It is proper and pleasing to God for his earthly servants to lift their voices in literal song." As he's speaking, Brother Nathan Knorr steps forward and hands him a red booklet. Then Brother Franz announces the release of the Kingdom Service Songbook. He explains that this book will be used for singing at congregation meetings.
That's it. That's how they cover this episode in Watchtower history. They literally just give you the years 1938 to 1944 without even attempting to offer an explanation. As I've said, it seems fairly obvious to me the thing that changed between those 2 years, 1938 and 1944, was Rutherford dying. So the new administration reversed a decision he made that they didn't like. And doesn't this demonstrate how human this organization is? I actually have a copy in my collection of the Kingdom Service Songbook. There it is. And I found it interesting when William Malenfant alluded to the fact that Nathan Knorr stepped forward from behind the stage and handed a copy to Fred Franz. That was actually new information to me. I didn't know that. But doesn't that also hint at how human this is? That sounds to me like a little bit of a publicity stunt. That sounds to me like we want to show where this is coming from. We want to show that Nathan Knorr is the one that's producing this book so that Brother Franz can present it to the organization. Bear in mind, this was pre-governing body. 1944 was well and truly before the governing body arrangement came in 1971. And the 40s, 50s, and 60s, it was all about the president. The president was the person. It was the organization following a president who they assumed to be being used by Jesus. So that, to me, that little piece of information fills in a few blanks and reinforces what I already knew, which is that this is a very human organization, and they were very, very impressed with position and power, specifically the position and power of Nathan Knorr. But again, in the context of what we heard previously in this episode, what have we learned? We've learned that David Splane was lying to Jehovah's Witnesses in saying there has only ever been progress, there has only ever been advancement. If that's the case, how do we explain the elder arrangement flip-flop? And how do we explain Jehovah's Witnesses going from singing to not singing to singing again?